Okay, I'm gonna try an early morning video blog. Yeah, I ride to work at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, so I'm up before the sun, you know. So I want to express myself on the Sci-Fi Express lane, basically continuing a conversation that I had with another creator out of my home state, New Jersey, Nasheed Gifted. And we were talking about kind of New York Comic Con. We were talking about the evolution of these comic conventions, specifically the ones in New York, and how things are progressing. Now, I do talk to creators all over the country, actually all over the world, but the ones outside the U.S., I more so just engage with them social media-wise, but the engagements are real good. So, and sometimes I do call them on the WhatsApp and Facebook. So that's really cool. So you got to embrace technology. Anyway, talking to brother Nasheed Gifted, right? I don't know why I keep coming out of focus. All right, let's put that back in. And it's still out of focus. So anyway, we were talking about what I think is the end of Black Sci-fi. And I know that sounds like crazy, but when you listen to what I'm saying, and I kind of said it a little bit in one of my previous blogs, but tragic, right? I consider myself a Black Sci-fi writer, and so to say the end of Black Sci-fi is like, damn, dude, what you trying to predict? So I'm a speculator, so I'm speculating about it, and why I think this could be considered the era of the end of Black Sci-fi is for two reasons. One, Black Sci-fi is a racially, culturally designated area of science fiction, right? And it is probably 10 years old. I don't even put it at 15 years old. So somewhere in between 10 and 15 years old, right? And not all Black writers of science fiction embraced it. I mean, it was just last year, probably in November, that I was doing, blogs about explaining what Black science fiction was. So that's one thing. And then also it exploded, just like hip hop and other terminologies of things that are out there in the world. When they start off with a boom. Like boom, guess who stepped in the room? It's Black Sci-fi, right? It stepped in the room, bow. It stepped in so hard that pioneering Black science fiction writers like Octavia Butler, Stephen Barnes, Samuel Delany, and others. Like, we are finding other Black science fiction writers who wrote science fiction, as early as 1900s. I'm going to say Langston Hughes. I'm going to say what's my man that wrote the Black National Anthem? Golly, his name escapes me, right? He wrote some science fiction, right? These are Weldon Johnson's, James Weldon Johnson, right? He wrote some science fiction. And if you get the book, Dark Matters, it has all the pioneers, I wouldn't say all of them, but there's 2 volumes. So they got about 90 to 99%. They may have missed 1 or 2 people, right? But they have them all in there. Shout out to Cherie Thomas, right? We had Black pioneers of science fiction years, but the thing is, they didn't call themselves Black science fiction writers. They just called themselves science fiction writers, and that's all well and good. And there's been a there's been a group of black writers of science fiction now that somewhat never really call themselves black science fiction writers. All of these titles are for marketing purposes in the first place and help readers and other people understand better what type of story they're in for, you know, what type of story is in the pages, you know. So black science fiction is just like, you know, space opera. It's just like fantasy. It's a term, you know, for marketing purposes. Now, moving beyond that, it has, of course, taken off, but just like science fiction in itself, it has varying subgenres in it. We have the same things. We have, you know, everything isn't necessarily about a black plot point where black people are the plot point. Some of it is arbitrary, like my book, Rashida the Zombie Killer. It's about a zombie outbreak in New York, but the main character addressing it is black. So that makes it, you know, black science fiction. The zombies are caused by some scientific device, and thus it moves forward. I have another one called the Harlem Shake. The Harlem Shake is not a black earthquake. It's just an earthquake that starts in the black community of Harlem. And it's told through the characters of the diversity of Harlem, black and Puerto Rican. So thus it is a black science fiction story. Some others are like, say, Dark Universe by MV Media, edited by Milton Davis, is, you know, a story about black people, a black billionaire who decides to terraform a planet for black people, and, you know, thousands of years later they have an empire, and that's beautiful. Now that's a black speculative fiction story, but it focuses on black people's trajectory, right? So you have another one that he did. Well, this is probably an anthology. The Steamfunk anthology. The Steamfunk anthology was black stories in the Victorian subgenre of steampunk, but when they did it in black stories, they left out the Victorian, they left out the European, and they maintained the clockwork and the steam and the other gadgets, but the hierarchy of a Victorian empire was left out, and the setting of Europe and the setting of classism. So I don't know, they may have, some stories may have classism in there, but they changed it all around. A lot of it was set right here in America. Others were set in Africa. So it's just very interesting on how we were bending and switching. And we did the same thing to steampunk by making it steamfunk. We had been playing with the subgenres in science fiction and still considering them black. However, what made me think of this blog was when we talked about particularly New York Comic Con. And New York Comic Con was quick, a lot faster than Comic Con in California, to embrace panel topics that were about black sci-fi and the black happenings in comic books, differently than Comic Con. Comic Con may have had a black panel here and there, but their biggest black panel was the Friday Black Panel by Michael from Milestone. That dominated everything because he did all day, 3-hour, 4-hour panel or something like that on Friday, and it was like a black year in review in comics, and that kind of sucked up all of the other black panels that they might have been able to have. However, New York Comic Con now, has changed up, and the what is black sci-fi, or experience of a black science fiction writer, all those type of panel topics are like history. Now they want to deal with black writers in the post-apocalypse, black writers in space, black writers in this, and we are going back to almost what we started off as black writers of science fiction. Now, what do I think about that? I definitely embrace black science fiction as one of my titles, and I did not allow it to limit me to black science fiction panels. Now, I say that because there's some black science fiction writers that did not engage in other mainstream panels, and they felt like nobody else understands my experiences, and that they were always bringing up black in their answers and their comments. And when they were on panels with other black creators, they didn't have to say, well, when black people, we don't do this. And I think there's a lot of truth to that, because I found myself doing a lot of that. However, it started to die down sort of after Black Panther. And I say that because a lot of it was ignorance on the part of the mainstream as to what a black science fiction story could be, and how it doesn't fully differ, but only contrasts from a white American science fiction story. I also think as internet started to push for diversity, female writers and writers of other colors outside of brown and black people started to join in. And as they started to see that they already had no problem with Chinese and Pacific Islanders stories, and stories from South and Central America, India, that black was no big difference. And if you see black the same as you see a story from India, then it just becomes a different type of a variational type of story. And that's helped black science fiction become more understood, and the writers like us, like me, having had different experiences on panels. I think there was two problems with it. Why that existed was, one, just like a black superhero, you don't necessarily, the white world is scared of a black Iron Man or black Batman, not because of what they look like, but what they think a black person would do with the money and the directive that black Batman has. You know what I'm saying? Because they think we have such a chip on our shoulder with white people that, and this is some of them, that will turn that ability on them. Same thing with Iron Man. And that same thing with giving us a pen, right? So they think I'm going to write a black Batman story if they give me my pen and let me go to town. And to be honest, some black people did. Some black people wrote black heroes that, of course, defended the black community, but many times defended it from white people. It is what it is. But as we got deeper into black science fiction, most black writers didn't give a damn about racism and white people, and they just dealt with global and intergalactic threats, right? And that kind of neutralized the fear of the black pen, right, in terms of science fiction, and that allowed it to be more embraced. Now, there was also gatekeepers who were shaping and picking. Many times, I think it accelerated the engagement from black female writers from the continent of Africa, or people who had real African sounding names, because I think a lot of times the gatekeepers of these big publishers think that these people don't have chips on their shoulders as much as Black Americans do, and that it's easier for them to take a story from them. Now, this is all conspiracy theory. This is all speculation. So I'm not going to say that it's factual, but I'm going to say that that's what I kind of think happened. So to wrap this all up, I'm not saying Black science fiction is dead, nowhere in conception. What I'm saying is the concept of what Black science fiction has now been blown up and expanded, and we're going to start seeing Black science fiction writers use other terms, sometimes probably just science fiction, but they may say well, they already said they were Black horror writers, but they may say, I write in the post-apocalypse, I write about space, they may say that, as opposed to saying I'm a science fiction writer and I write Black science fiction. They may be more specific and say, I write cyberpunk, I write steampunk, there you have it. And they may not say the Black science fiction part of it. Anyway, like, subscribe, and more so with me, comment, engage me, ask me questions. My email is in here, I think. Or you can find my email. All right, deuces.